Greetings, chess players! My name is Chris Torres, and this is Daily Chess Musings special coverage of the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi. Game 6 was the first decisive game of the 2021 World Championship Match. Magnus Carlsen beat the Russian challenger grandmaster Ian Nepomniachtchi in a game I can only describe as being historic both in terms of its length and importance. So historic, in fact, that I will be breaking it up over 3 videos. The first time control of Game 6 was a roller coaster ride, with Carlsen using a non-forceful opening setup with the white pieces to avoid opening theory in favor of actually playing chess. On move 17, Nepo rejected an opportunity to swap queens and later offered Magnus Carlsen the opportunity to trade his queen for 2 rooks. Carlsen agreed to this exchange, which created mega imbalances. A fierce skirmish ensued, with both players so low on time that they were both literally seconds away from immediately losing. Under this extreme time pressure, Carlsen uncharacteristically missed some important opportunities, and when the dust settled on move 40, both players received an additional hour to continue the fight from an equal yet wonderfully imbalanced position. And now, without further ado, let's take a look at part 1 of 3 from Game 6 of the Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi match. So in Game 6, Magnus Carlsen was white and started with 1d4. Ian Nepomniachtchi played knight f6, 2 knight f3, so a queen's pawn opening. Nepo plays 2d5, and then 3g3. Magnus steers the game into an offbeat queen pawn opening. Ian replies with 3e6, 4g2, fianchettoing the bishop, and 4e7. Both sides have cleared the roadway for castling. And so move 5, Magnus castles, and Ian castles. 6b3. Of course, had Carlsen played 6c4 and then black plays dxc4, we could transpose to a Catalan, as we saw in Game 2 of this match. With 6b3, it seems Carlsen is avoiding opening theory in favor of just playing chess. 6c5. Nepo replies to his opponent's unambitious opening by taking a bolder approach toward the center. Alternatively, black could have played 6 knight b to d7, and then bishop b2, b6, c4, bishop b7, cx d5, knight takes d5, maybe knight b to d2, and then 10 c5. And that was seen in Bojan Krejcika versus Kevin Spurgett in the 2006 Das Hermanas chess tournament. But back to our feature game, where Nepo took that bold approach toward the center with 6c5. 7 dxc5. Carlsen captures the c5 pawn, losing his center pawn, but coaxing black to spend a second opening tempo on his dark bishop. 7, bishop takes c5. And Nepo does spend that second tempo with his dark bishop. 8 c4. Now Carlsen attacks the center. 8 dxc4. Ian captures the pawn, losing his center pawn as well. 9 queen c2. Carlsen sidesteps the trade of queens by activating his queen to c2, as he did in the deceptively similar Game 2 Catalan. I say deceptively similar because the differences between this and what happened in Game 2 are not small, as white has a pawn on b3 instead of a knight on e5, and black has a bishop on c5 with no pawn on b5. In chess, a couple of small differences make a world of difference. Magnus had another interesting option other than 9 queen c2, and that would have been 9 bxc4. To which black could play queen c7, bishop f4 threatening the queen, queen e7, knight b to d2, knight to c6, knight to b3, rook to d8, 13 queen c2, e5,
bishop g5, bishop e6, knight takes c5, queen takes c5, rook a to b1, and pawn to b6, is what occurred in the game Peschke versus Wolf von Herman, played in Berlin in 1995. And in that game, black won after 37 moves. If you want to see any of these games that I reference in the video, check out my notes to this lesson on dailychessmusings.com. Back to our feature game, where Carlsen has just played 9 queen c2, 9 queen e7. Jan activates his queen in support of the bishop on c5. 10 knight b to d2. Now that black's bishop on c5 is defended, by playing knight b to d2, Carlsen is offering Nepomniachtchi the chance to capture an extra pawn with cxb3. 10 knight c6. Nepo declines the offer. Had he taken the pawn with 10 cxb3, Carlsen probably would have taken back with 11 knight takes b3, to which black could play bishop a3 or bishop b6. If bishop b6, then Carlsen could play 12 a4, threatening a5, and a bishop to a3 skewer on the queen and rook. So black would need to move their queen, and offering a trade seems to make the most sense. Queen c7, queen takes c7, bishop takes c7, bishop a3, threatening the rook, rook goes to d8, taking the open file, then knight f to d4, opening up the bishop on g2, and looking slightly better for white. The alternative line is, after 10 cxb3, knight takes b3, bishop a3, to which white can take the bishop, and then black's queen recaptures. White could play 13 knight to e5, knight b to d7, 14 knight c4, threatening black's queen, so black's queen can return to e7, and then 15 rook f to c1. And this is the never-before-seen gambit that Carlsen likely had in mind, where white definitely gets developmental compensation for the sacrificed pawn. But Nepo decided against capturing on b3, and instead played 10 knight c6. 11 knight takes c4. With his gambit declined, Carlsen captures the c4 pawn with the knight, which can, from c4, jump to the e5 square. 11 b5. Nepo wants to get his c8 bishop into the game, so he plays b5, threatening white's knight. 12 knight c to e5. As expected, Carlsen's knight moves to a more traditional post on e5. 12 knight b4. This really nice threatening move clears black's pieces from the diagonal before the bishop moves to b7. Had Nepo played 12 bishop b7 immediately, then knight takes c6, bishop takes c6, b4 threatening the bishop, but the other bishop can take on f3, bishop takes f3, bishop d4, bishop takes a8, bishop takes a1, would give white an edge, as it's more difficult for black to retreat their bishop out of harm's way, which is why Nepomniachtchi played 12 knight to b4. 13 queen b2. The only drawback with placing the queen on the a1 to h8 diagonal could be that it's interfering with the c1 bishop doing the same. 13 bishop b7. Jan solved the dilemma of his light bishop and unified his rooks. 14 a3. Carlsen sends black's knight back home. 14 knight c6. 15 knight d3. Magnus clearly doesn't want to draw and chooses not to trade, thus keeping more complexity. 15 bishop b6. 16 bishop g5. With his queen still occupying b2, Magnus develops his bishop to g5 with a knight pin while unifying his rooks. 16 rook f to d8. 17 bishop takes f6. Carlsen offers Jan two paths. Retaking with the queen seems most natural, but will result in a trade of queens and perhaps place this game on the path toward another draw. The other option of retaking with gx f6 exposes black's king, but even with the weakened pawn shield, black's bishops seem better poised for a kingside attack than any of Carlsen's pieces. 17 gx-f6. Especially with the queen still on board, Jan chooses the less natural path with greater risk and imbalances. 18. Rook a to c1. Carlsen improves his rook to the open c-file. 18. Knight d4. And Nepo advances his knight to d4. 19. Knight takes d4. Carlsen wisely decides to remove black's knight. 19. Bishop takes d4. But that decision comes at a cost of allowing Nepo's bishop to be powerfully placed on the d4 square, where it shares a diagonal with white's king and immediately threatens white's queen. 20. Queen a2. Carlsen moves his queen to safety, and also where it defends a3 from immediate capture. 20. Bishop takes g2. Nepomniachtchi gets rid of white's fianchettoed bishop, which is of fundamental importance in positions where someone is castled behind his fianchetto. 21. King takes g2. And then 21. Queen b7, check. So after 17 gx-f6, Nepomniachtchi has managed to improve his pieces at the expense of Carlsen's. 22. King g1. 22. Queen e4. And Nepo continues to display his advantage in force by placing his queen where it has tremendous scope, and especially when compared directly to Carlsen's queen. 23. Queen c2. Carlsen's queen is much happier on c2. 23. a5. Taking b4 from Carlsen's knight. 24. Rook fd1, to which Carlsen responds by improving his rook. Black's 24th move is king g7. Jan moves his king closer to the action for the eventual endgame, while making it so that if there is a trade of rooks on d8, his king will not be checked. 25. Rook d2. A little move, but not an innocent one. Carlsen is planning on forming a queen and rook battery on the d-file, and then playing e3. Black's bishop would need to retreat to b6 in order to defend the d8 rook a second time, which would allow Carlsen to play knight to f4 with the potential of an offensive queen move along the d1 to h5 diagonal. Subtle and brilliant. 25. Rook a to c8. But before any of those subtle threats can transpire, Jan proposes a queen for 2 rooks trade. 26. Queen takes c8. Carlsen accepts, creating massive imbalances. 26. Rook takes c8. 27. Rook takes c8. And Black's 27th move is queen d5. The advantage of having a queen in such positions is that the queen can more easily threaten targets on both the king side and the queen side. 28. b4. Carlsen advances the pawn out of the queen's threat and would very much enjoy exchanging pawns as they are targets for Black's queen. 28. a4. Nepo declines the trade and is now threatening to play queen to b3, attacking white's backward pawn. 29. e3. But before Jan can attack the pawns, he must first attend to the new threat from Carlsen on his bishop. 29. Bishop e5 moves the bishop out of harm's way. 30. h4. Of course, creates access to h2 for his king. More on that later. But also indirectly stops Jan from playing queen b3. But how? Let me show you. If 30 queen b3, then 31 knight takes e5, fx e5, rook to c7, and then if queen takes a3, white can punish black for being overly greedy by doubling the rooks on the 7th rank. Queen takes b4, rook takes f7, check. King g6, rook g7, check. King h6, rook c to f7, queen to e4, rook g5, and white is threatening checkmate. So queen g6, rook takes g6, king takes g6, and white's rook goes back to b7, which moves the rook out of harm's way and immediately threatens and will win black's pawn on b5 en route to white easily winning this endgame. But there's one more variation in there I would like to look at. And that is, again, after 30 queen b3, knight takes e5, fx e5, rook c7. What if black plays 32 king g6 instead of the greedy queen takes a3? Well, then white can still double their rooks on the 7th rank. Black's king can move out of those potential mating troubles by going to f5. Rook takes f7 check, king to e4, rook takes h7. Now queen takes a3, king g2, queen takes b4. But white can play h5, where Carlsen's h-pawn will be hard to address for black, whereas white can easily place a rook behind black's passed pawns. So yes, 30h4 did indeed stop black from playing queen to b3. So black's 30th move is h5. Jan senses the threat from h4 and stops it immediately. 31 king h2. Carlsen, who at this point was down to just 3 minutes and 6 seconds on his clock, moves his king to a safe square on the 2nd rank, which could be useful if Jan plays 31 queen takes b3, and then 32 knight takes bishop, pawn takes knight, rook c7, queen takes a3, rook d2 to d7, doubling up rooks on the 7th rank. Where then, because Carlsen moved his king to h2, it is uncheckable by black's forces. However, black's move was 31 bishop to b2. Nepo was also short on time, though he made this move with 14 minutes and 18 seconds left on his clock. Perhaps being low on time or trying to rush Carlsen factored into him making a mistake here by leaving his queen vulnerable to attack. Clearly better was 31 queen b3, which of course threatens white's a3 pawn, but doesn't give white the attacking initiative against black's queen. And then we would see that variation we discussed after Carlsen moved his king to h2, which proceeds with knight takes e5, fx e5, rook c7, queen takes a3, rook d to d7, doubling up rooks on the 7th rank, king g6, rook takes f7, queen to b2, threatening the f2 pawn if the f7 rook leaves the file. But white can play 36 e4, and just look at how white's pawns would be controlling f5 and g5. Black's king has no escape. Black could play 36 queen e2, but then rook g7, king h6, rook h7, king g6, rook c to g7 check, king f6, rook f7 check, king g6, and rook h to g7 check would have resulted in a draw. Black's king may not be able to escape, but white's rooks are also unable to deliver checkmate. But Nepo played the mistake 31 bishop b2. 32 rook c5. Now down to 3 minutes and 3 seconds. Magnus seizes the opportunity to target black's queen, which is also pinned to the weak h5 pawn. All this while the bishop on b2 is under threat by 2 of white's pieces. 32 queen d6. Jan moves his queen to a safe square while maintaining the pin on d3 so that neither Carlsen's knight nor rook can capture the bishop on b2 without an at least even exchange. 33 rook d1. With exactly 3 minutes left and no increment to play 8 moves or automatically lose, Carlsen misses a winning opportunity. What did he miss? Let's take a look. 33 rook c to c2. And if black captures the pawn with 33 bishop takes a3, then knight f4, discovered attack on black's queen, queen to f8, rook to d7, king to g8, rook d to c7, queen takes b4, rook to c8 check, king g7, knight takes h5 check, king g6, knight to f4 check, king g7, rook 2 to c7, queen e4, rook to d7, bishop b2, rook c to c7, and white would easily win from here, as black has no acceptable way to add another defender to f7. And white's king is still untouchable on h2. Also of interest, after 33 rook c to c2, what if black plays bishop a1 instead of taking the pawn on a3? Well, white's knight can still go to f4, again threatening black's king and queen simultaneously. To which black could play queen a6, knight takes h5 check, king h6, knight to f4, queen b7. Now the 8th rank is weak, so white could play rook d8, f5, rook c to d2, coordinating the rooks, queen to e4, rook 2 to d7, bishop e5, knight to h3, king g7, rook e8, queen to g4, rook e to e7, doubling up on the 7th rank again, king g6, and then rook takes f7. So it's worth repeating that in all of these variations of interest, Carlsen's king to h2 move makes his king untouchable by black's pieces, while white has time to organize his rooks against black's weak f7 pawn. But Carlsen missed these two variations because of the serious time trouble he was in, and played 33 rook to d1. And black's 33rd move was bishop takes a3. Nepo gladly takes on a3, creating an outside passed pawn. 34 rook takes b5. Carlsen creates his own pass pawn. 34 queen to d7. Jan plays a really nice move, which threatens the undefended rook. So 35 rook c5. As 35 rook b6 would be a huge mistake because of queen c7, rook a6, and then queen to c2 will win material and the game for black, which is why Magnus Carlsen played 35 rook c5, to which Jan responded 35 e5. In time trouble himself now, down to just 3 minutes and 35 seconds, Jan makes another inaccuracy. This move takes f4 from Carlsen's knight and prepares perhaps to move forward again to e4. But the more natural bishop takes b4 was just more accurate. When your opponent is in time trouble, it is always better to play more accurately than rapidly, as accurate play will require time to respond in kind. Had Jan just played 35 bishop takes b4, then Carlsen could have played rook c to c1, coordinating his rook so his knight can move. Black could play bishop e7, knight f4, queen to b7, knight takes h5 check, king h6, knight to f4, a3. Black's passed pawn is just 2 squares away from being a hero. Rook to d2, f5, rook c to d1, queen f3, rook c1, bishop to b4, rook a2, bishop to d6, rook c to a1, stopping and threatening that dangerous a3 pawn. Queen to b7, rook takes a3, bishop takes a3, rook takes a3, and then queen to b2 wins for black, as it's threatening white's rook and f2 simultaneously. But Jan played 35 e5. And given how important the result from Game 6 was in the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match, I am sure this questionable pawn push by Jan is something that will haunt him for a long time. 36 rook to c2. Down to 1 minute and 10 seconds, Carlsen plays a close second best move. Better was 36 e4, then queen d4, rook to a5, rooks belong behind passed pawns, queen to c4, rook takes a4, queen to b3, rook takes a3, queen takes a3, b5, Carlsen's passed pawn is off and running, queen to b3, rook to d2, so queen takes b5, f3, queen a5 threatening the rook, rook e2, queen c3, knight to e1, queen c4, rook to e3, and f5 is considered an improvement for white over that which was played in the actual game. However, that's not to say 36 rook c2 was a terrible mistake. Just slightly inaccurate. 36 queen d5. Whether it was the result of trying to be tricky or trying to rush Carlsen, Nepomniachtchi continues to play imprecisely. Better again was simply playing bishop takes b4. If 36 bishop takes b4, white's knight cannot take back because it is still pinned to the rook on d1. But Jan played 36 queen d5. 37 rook d to d2. Carlsen wisely connects his rook, and now his knight can move. Also now, white is threatening rook to a2. 37 queen b3. 38 rook a2. And then 38 e4. With 30 seconds left to make 3 moves, Jan errs. Better was 38 f5, to which white could play rook a1, f4, ex f4, ex f4, rook d to a2. White can coordinate their rooks offensively in the a file, but after fx g3 check and fx g3, white's king is vulnerable to attack. And black can take their knight immediately. Queen takes d3, but white would get the bishop back with rook takes a3. But then queen d2 check, king h1, queen d5. We see that vulnerability with queen d5 check, king g1, queen d4 check, king g2, and queen d2 check will lead to a draw. But Jan missed it. He played 38 e4, 39 knight c5. Obviously threatening the queen, so 39 queen takes b4. 40 knight takes e4. With 29 seconds left, Carlsen makes the time control, but one more inaccuracy. Better was 40 rook d to c2, which keeps more pressure on the pinned bishop and a4 pawn. For that matter, black's queen would have been glued defending those targets from white. For instance, play might continue. 40 f5, knight takes a4, queen takes a4, rook c3, queen d1, rook c takes a3. And this favors white as his rooks can start teaming up against black's weak pawns. And now there are no queen pawn targets for Jan's queen. But Carlsen played 40 knight takes e4. Before we look at Jan's 40th move from the actual game, it's worth noting that 40 queen takes e4 may look okay at first glance, but after Carlsen's rook takes the bishop on a3, queen b4 threatening the rook, both white's rooks can coordinate against the weak a4 pawn. And after winning that, Carlsen can keep targeting black's weak pawns with his 2 rooks, and Jan would be at a serious disadvantage trying to defend those pawns against 2 rooks with just 1 queen. So, Jan plays the accurate 40 queen b3, giving him equal chances. Now that both players have reached move 40, they are rewarded with another hour to make 20 moves, and they will now be playing with an increment.
I hope you enjoyed today's special presentation of Part 1 of Game 6 from the 2021 FIDE World Championship Match between Magnus Carlsen and Ian Nepomniachtchi. For more on the match, please visit the official website at FIDEWorldChampionship.com. Additionally, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to my Daily Chess Musings YouTube channel. Finally, be sure to check out dailychessmusings.com to find my notes to this video as well as thousands of other free learning resources. My name is Chris Torres, and I will see you next time with a special presentation of Part 2 of Game 6 from the Carlsen-Nepomniachtchi match.